into something that I know is on a lot of people's minds, and that is what's going to happen with Disney World in 2025.
It's going to be a really interesting year. There's a lot of factors all kind of converging at that point in time, and it should be a pivotal year, I think, for Disney World.
Okay, so let's just start with like the basic projections for 2025. What are we looking at in terms of like projected attendance?
Yeah, so if we look at the trends and some of the things that Bob Iger has been saying during the earnings calls, Disney is seeing its revenue increase, but attendance has started to flatten, especially domestically.
Okay, so more money but fewer people. That's interesting. That
That
seems counterintuitive.
It is a little bit, and I think part of that is probably attributed to the fact that revenge travel surge, the post-pandemic boom is cooling down, people are traveling less overall, and those who are traveling domestically are really looking for shorter, more budget-friendly trips.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I get it. People were cooped up for so long that revenge travel was just like
Yeah.
everybody had to get out. But now it's like inflation, economic uncertainty. You want to be a little bit more cautious maybe with how you're spending your vacation dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where it gets kind of interesting for Disney World. Domestic travelers are important, of course, but international tourism is absolutely vital for the Florida tourism industry in general.
Interesting.
International visitors, on average, stay longer and spend almost twice as much as their domestic counterparts.
Wow. Okay, so they need those international travelers to kind of like balance out maybe that dip in domestic visitors.
Exactly.
But they've also implemented some pretty significant price increases, haven't they?
They have, and this is another major factor to consider as we look ahead to 2025. Everything from park tickets to food has seen a pretty significant price hike, really exceeding inflation by a noticeable margin. A Mickey pretzel, for instance, costs over $3 more now than it did in 2013.
Yeah, wow, that's a big jump. So what's the rationale behind these price increases?
Well, they've cited inflation and, the pandemic recovery as the primary reasons. However, it's worth noting that the parks are still turning a profit, even with this flat attendance. And so it suggests that Disney is strategically focusing on what they call yield, which is essentially aiming for higher revenue per guest.
Okay, so fewer guests spending more money. That seems like a risky strategy, especially with some competition on the horizon.
You're absolutely right. And that brings us to the elephant in the room, Universal's Epic Universe, which is currently scheduled to open in May 2025, just weeks after the start of what would typically be Disney World's busy season.
Yeah, and they're pulling out all the stops. They've got 5 immersive lands: Celestial Park, a new Wizarding World of Harry Potter, Super Nintendo World, How to Train Your Dragon, and a Dark Universe land. Plus 3 new hotels. It's a huge undertaking.
It is. And while Universal has also seen a dip in attendance and revenue this past year, likely due to the same factors affecting Disney, 2024 has been a year of preparation for them, just as 2025 will be for Disney.
Okay, so we've got this fascinating dynamic here. Disney raising prices, aiming for higher revenue with fewer guests. And at the same time, you have this massive new competitor about to enter the scene. How do you think this will all affect Disney's overall strategy and projected attendance for 2025?
Well, that's a great question. And to answer that, I think we need to look at how Disney has responded to competition in the past. Historically, new theme park openings in Orlando have actually benefited Disney. When Universal opened its Studios Park and Islands of Adventure, Disney actually saw an uptick in visitors around those times.
Interesting. So rather than people choosing one or the other, they were kind of like extending their vacations and doing both?
Exactly. And it seems like Disney has actually been preparing for Epic Universe with this very thing in mind. Over the past few years, they've invested heavily in new attractions like Star Wars, Galaxy's Edge, and Pandora, the world of Avatar. They've also been reimagining Epcot with new lands and experiences. And they've even been adding new rides to classic parks like Magic Kingdom and Hollywood Studios.
It almost feels like they knew this was coming, and they've been strategically laying the groundwork. But here's the other thing. They've also announced some pretty massive expansion plans of their own. A Cars-themed land in Magic Kingdom, a Villains land, a Monsters, Inc. land in Hollywood Studios, and a massive Tropical America section in Animal Kingdom.
Yes, but there's a catch. None of those will actually be open in 2025. What visitors will experience in 2025 is a lot of construction. Similar to what happened during the Epcot overhaul, those parks are going to be undergoing major transformations, and that could deter some visitors who just don't want to deal with the disruption.
Yeah, I get it. Construction's messy, so price increases, a brand new competitor, major construction. It's a lot to juggle. And it makes predicting attendance in 2025 even more challenging.
It really does. But there's one more interesting piece to this puzzle. Disney execs have actually stated that they aren't really all that worried about Epic Universe. In fact, they've even suggested that it could boost their attendance.
Wait, really? How could a new competitor help Disney?
Well, it goes back to that idea that people want to experience everything Orlando has to offer. And historically, Universal openings have actually driven more people to the area as a whole, and Disney has benefited from that. So the question is, will that trend continue in 2025?
I guess we'll have to wait and see. But this raises another question. Does Disney's current pricing and expansion strategy, with all of its moving parts, does it truly optimize both revenue and the guest experience?
It's a complex question and one that we will explore further in part 2 of our deep dive. So picking up where we left off, let's unpack that Disney strategy a little bit further because they're clearly walking this tightrope here, trying to maximize their revenue, but at the same time making sure that they're ensuring a positive guest experience.
With all these factors at play, the price increases, construction, a new competitor, it seems like a really difficult balancing act. So where do you even begin to assess whether or not they're succeeding?
Well, I think one place to start is to look at those specific offerings that they have planned for 2025, alongside those massive construction projects that we were just talking about, and ask ourselves, are these new additions enough to really justify those higher prices and potentially mitigate the impact of all that construction and the competition?
Okay, that makes sense. So let's dive into those offerings. What can visitors actually expect to see and do in 2025, besides navigate construction walls?
Well, in Magic Kingdom, there's a new nighttime parade. It's called Disney Starlight, featuring cutting-edge technology and dazzling floats. It sounds pretty spectacular visually.
And what about that Pirates of the Caribbean Tavern? I've heard some buzz about that.
Yes, that's a new lounge experience designed to kind of build upon the beloved ride's story and lore, and guests can imagine themselves, sipping grog. Alongside the Barker Bird himself.
That sounds like a must-do for any pirate fan. Over at Epcot, they're revamping Test Track, right? Which is always a popular ride.
Right. Yeah, the updated version is going to explore technological advancements, showcasing how our relationship with mobility kind of connects us all from the past to the future. It sounds like it'll be both thrilling and thought-provoking.
That's cool. And for those who maybe want a more leisurely experience, there's the new Spaceship Earth Lounge.
Exactly. Located near that iconic geodesic sphere, it will feature design elements that are inspired by the landmark, and guests can just kind of unwind with a space-themed cocktail after their journey through time.
I love it. Moving on to Hollywood Studios, are there any villainous delights in store?
Well, there's a brand new villain show hitting the stage, replacing Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy. It promises to be this really dazzling spectacle, featuring some of those classic Disney villains, breaking free from the magic mirror to entertain the audience, and maybe slightly frighten them.
And speaking of beloved characters, what about the Little Mermaid stage show? Wasn't that delayed?
Yes, it was originally planned for fall 2024, but it's been pushed to summer 2025. The show is described as this visually stunning production, retelling the story from Ariel's perspective with puppetry, digital animation, and live motion capture.
Oh, wow, that sounds cool. And lastly, what's happening over at Animal Kingdom? Anything replacing? It's tough to be a bug.
Yes, get ready for Zootopia, Better Z together. This new show will follow Judy Hopps and Nick Wilde on a wild adventure through a variety of biomes. It's sure to be popular with fans of the film.
Okay, so even with the construction, it seems like there are still plenty of new experiences to draw visitors in 2025. Do you think it's enough to offset those other challenges that we've talked about?
That's the big question. It really comes down to what guests value most. If they prioritize new and exciting experiences even amidst construction, then maybe these offerings are enough. But if price is a major factor, or if they're really seeking a more polished, finished park experience, then 2025 might not be the ideal time to visit.
And let's not forget about the competition. Universal's Epic Universe is opening, just as Disney is in the midst of all of this transition. Do you think Disney is underestimating the impact this could have?
It's certainly possible. While they've said they aren't worried, the reality is that Epic Universe is a game changer for the Orlando theme park landscape. Universal is offering immersive experiences based on incredibly popular franchises like Harry Potter and Nintendo, and that's going to be a major draw for a lot of people, and Disney can't ignore that.
So how does this all tie back to that idea of optimizing both revenue and guest experience?
Yeah.
Is it even possible for Disney to achieve both in this environment?
It's a tough needle to thread. On the one hand, they're raising prices and kind of betting on this brand loyalty to maintain revenue, even with fewer guests. But on the other hand, they're facing this year of major construction and this heightened competition. So the question is, can those new experiences, along with that classic Disney magic, really justify the premium pricing in this context?
Yeah, I guess only time will tell. But focusing solely on these factors within Disney World might be too narrow of a view. We also have to consider what Disney is doing outside of the parks too, right?
You're right. We can't overlook the expansion of the Disney Cruise Line. With two new ships, the Disney Destiny and Disney Adventure, launching in 2025, and sailing to new destinations like Singapore and Southeast Asia. This presents another option for Disney fans who might be a little hesitant about a theme park visit in 2025.
So in a sense, Disney is hedging their bets a little bit. They're investing in new attractions and offerings in the parks, but also expanding their cruise offerings to potentially capture a different segment of the market. It's almost like they're saying, if you're not coming to the parks, come sail with us.
Precisely. And that brings us to the heart of the matter. Is this strategy, this balancing act, ultimately sustainable? Can Disney continue to raise prices, manage this construction disruption, and fend off this competition while still delivering that magical guest experience they're known for?
That's a question we'll explore further in the final part of our deep dive. So we've talked about this really crowded landscape that Disney World is going to be facing in 2025. Price increases, construction, a brand new competitor in Universal, and even this expansion of their cruise line. It's a lot.
Yeah, it really is. And I think the big question that's looming over all of this is it sustainable? Can Disney pull off this really intricate balancing act without compromising, the very things that have made them so successful, the magic, the guest experience, that feeling that you're stepping into this world unlike any other?
It's like they're trying to appease investors with higher profits,
Hmm.
but also making sure that guests feel like they're getting their money's worth. How do you see this tension playing out in 2025 and beyond?
Well, I think a lot of it hinges on how those new offerings are received. We talked about the new shows and the revamped rides, the immersive experiences. But will those be enough to distract from the construction, to justify the price hikes, to compete with the allure of a brand new park like Epic Universe?
Yeah. And kind of even maintain that Disney level of quality and attention to detail while juggling so many projects at once. I mean, construction can be messy.
Hmm.
It can be disruptive. It doesn't exactly scream magical guest experience.
That's true. And, Disney's reputation is built on these immersive, meticulously crafted environments. And if the parks start to feel like construction zones, it could really erode that sense of wonder and escapism that people expect from a Disney vacation.
And we can't forget, it's not just Universal that they're competing with. It's every other vacation option out there. Cruises, all-inclusive resorts, staycations. People have more choices than ever before.
They do.
And Disney needs to make sure that what they're offering is compelling enough to justify the cost.
Exactly. And that's where I think that focus on yield that we were talking about earlier could backfire. Because if prices continue to rise, while the guest experience feels compromised, people might start to question whether Disney is still worth the premium price tag.
Right. It's like this delicate ecosystem.
Hmm.
And every decision has these ripple effects. If they push too hard on one lever, like pricing, it could throw the whole system out of balance.
Absolutely.
So do you think 2025 is going to be like a make it or break it year for Disney?
I think it's going to be a crucial year. It's a year of transition, a year of testing the waters,
Yeah.
seeing what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. And the results of those tests will likely shape their strategies for years to come.
I think so. If they can successfully navigate this challenging period, if they can find that sweet spot between revenue and guest experience, then they'll be well positioned for continued success. But if they stumble, if they lose sight of what makes Disney special, they could face a much tougher road ahead.
It's just a fascinating case study in how to manage a beloved brand
Yeah.
in this increasingly complex and competitive world.
It is.
And it's a story that's still unfolding.
Very true. And ultimately, I think the most important voice in this story is that of the guest, their decisions, their feedback, their experiences. Those are the things that are really going to determine the future of Disney World.
Absolutely. So to all those Disney fans out there planning your 2025 vacations, we want to hear from you. What are your priorities? What are your concerns? What would make or break your Disney experience?
Let us know your thoughts.
Yeah.
And join us as we continue to follow this ever-evolving story.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Once Upon a Mouse.